like this, school groups, public groups, or just coming through on the weekend. And we firmly believe in that embodiment of having people come out here, be on the Delta, learn about it, walk around, look at the plants, find the birds, smell the trees, all of that great stuff, and having recreation and relaxation and educational opportunities in natural spaces like this. And I know you all were just at Dutch Slough, which is another amazing future opportunity for interpretation, recreation, connection. That's what it's all about. It creates passionate folks and future stewards of our planet, of the Delta, of the water, of all of it. So thanks again for being here. If you need anything, please let me know. Bathrooms are directly back through the visitor center to the left of the front desk. And yeah, enjoy your meeting, everyone.
Thanks, Wyatt. Do you have any flow names back here?
I don't think so. I have a bunch of tissue paper.
Thank you. Again, as we discussed, there's still so much that can be done and should be done in terms of our work and barriers to break down. But as we all sit here in this beautiful setting, we have the opportunity to discuss how we can and should continue to make progress and build on the momentum that we're experiencing. As many of you know, the Delta Plan was just updated by the Council to include a complete California blueprint for Delta restoration. This ecosystem amendment, which amends Chapter 4 of the Delta Plan, provides a framework for achieving restored, protected, and functioning Delta ecosystems in a way that enhances the Delta as a unique place. Through this framework, we promote restoration that provides direct benefits to communities and minimizes conflicts. Crucially, the amendment promotes active consultation and coordination with Native American tribes. And I should just mention that we do have a listening session with our tribal leaders happening this week on Thursday, and that's set for 2 p.m. If any of you are interested, please connect with Brandon, who happens to be here in the audience. And why did we take this route? Why did we update the Delta Plan? In order to realize projects just like Dutch Slough, large-scale habitat that helps bring functional processes back to the Delta ecosystem. The challenge, of course, is navigating process. As many of you know here, it can be daunting. I just asked earlier to Katie, we've got 2 phases for Dutch Slough. There's some lessons learned. Is there a way for us to be able to speed up, if you will, phase 3? What lessons have we learned? What can we do, again, to make these types of restoration projects that much more expedient, that much more efficient, that much more strategic, but doing it in a much more timely way? And as somebody who came from the outside, from the private sector, and to hear that this has been happening since the 90s, it's wow, can we do some things a little bit faster? So I think that there's, again, a lot of opportunities for us to be able to learn and to grow. Excuse me. There is also inherent tension in the current land uses in the Delta, and we must be mindful of landowners' concerns. We must learn from their knowledge of the land. We must view them as partners and engage them early and meaningfully. So let's keep talking. Before we dive into our afternoon restoration discussion, I'd like to pause and ask everyone to formally introduce themselves and to please share anything of interest for the good of the order. And I'll start to my right here with Anna.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anna Neymark. I'm the Deputy Secretary and Special Counsel for California EPA. And I just really want to share my thanks on behalf of Secretary Garcia, Secretary for Environmental Protection, for this new vision for DPIIC. The Delta is a really complicated and special place, as you all know. It is the heartbeat of California, and having this opportunity to all get together and talk through some of the challenges and opportunities and be in this really exciting space and project is something that we really value, the California EPA, and just feel really grateful to be a part of it, and for the leadership of the Delta Stewardship Council and the chair. So thanks for having us here today. We're excited to see where this all takes us, and the kind of the fruits that informal engagement can bear. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Anna. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Jessica?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jessica Fain. I'm the Planning Director at the San Francisco Bay Conservation and Development Commission, sitting in today for Larry Goldspan, our Executive Director and member of the DPIIC. Just really excited to be here to kind of further bridge the gap between the Bay and the Delta and the importance of the overlap that's happening in exactly a place like this in Big Break, where our jurisdictions, start to get very close to each other, and we start to see a lot of the issues that are impacting the Delta kind of merging with what's impacting the Bay. So, are we doing updates now, or
Are we doing update? That's a good yes.
Okay. So just one quick update from BCDC. One of the projects we've been working on, which kind of has paralleled a project that has been going on in the Delta, and Delta Adapt is what we've been calling Bay Adapt. And so Bay Adapt was a regional initiative to try to get the 9-county Bay Area to come together around a set of shared principles and actions to how to adapt the Bay Area to sea level rise. We completed what was called the Bay Adapt Joint Platform about a year ago, and then thanks to some really generous funding from the Coastal Conservancy and the Ocean Protection Council, we've been able to move into this implementation phase. So we're just kicking that off now. One of the highlights is developing a regional shoreline adaptation plan, really rooted in strong partnership with local government. So we've stood up a local elected official task force to work with about 16 or 17 local elected officials from around the Bay Area to help us develop this vision and plan. We're also focusing on improving our regulatory program to think about what permitting in an environment where that's dynamic and changing that sea level rise should look like. So excited to put more resources into that. And then finally, really trying to prioritize frontline communities, equity, and environmental justice as we move forward with this work. So a variety of initiatives that really focus on that. So those are just some updates from the Bay, but just excited to be here today. Really appreciate the tour, the opportunity to see Dutch Slough and hear from a lot of the scientists and folks who have helped me.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joaquin Escobar, and I have the honor of being the chair of the State Water Resources Control Board. First, I have to just thank Chair Badonio for really bringing us out. And I think it's been a while since DPIIC has had a real engagement in the community here within the Delta to look at whether it's restoration of the work. And to your point, there's really no replacement of it. It's been really great to be able to get out here with everyone today, knowing that we're in a real critical moment in the Delta watershed. The water quality control plan update is an incredible priority of the boards. We've articulated that here by next summer, next fall, we're looking to adopt standards on the Sacramento Delta component, let alone move forward on implementation and evaluate voluntary agreements as well. And so the decision-making space we're all collectively in this coming year, these next years, is really going to be just critical that all of us articulate our various decision-making spaces, but also continue to have forums like this, where we're really talking about the resources that it's going to take to address look nationally at, say, the Everglades or the Chesapeake Bay or other real areas of significant national significance. And the Bay Delta is one of those. And here we have amongst us an incredible forum to talk about how we're using our state authorities and our federal resources and authorities to accomplish a lot. So the water quality control plan update is really front of mind here for the board as we all discuss the work ahead. I also have to acknowledge that we have a new water master as well, and acknowledge here Jay Ziegler, and really excited about his leadership and continue to bring us up together, given his experience and relationships between you all here. So just thank you all. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Joaquin. Now go to my left, Mike.
Thank you. I'm Mike Chakowski. I'm the science coordinator for the Southwestern region of the U.S. Geological Survey. It's good to see everyone again. I would also like to thank Chair Madueño and the leadership and staff of the Dutch Stewardship Council for organizing this tour today, despite the allergy implications. And also for the other activities that the Stewardship Council has been conducting, which from our perspective are an important contribution to ensuring that the science that we do and that other science providers do is closely aligned with the needs of our partners and managers of all of the restoration activities that are being conducted. I don't have a specific update from USGS other than to say that we have a lot of people who are very busy right now because of this water year has been an interesting one so far from a science perspective. But we're also very busy just dealing with the effects of long-term drought in the Western United States. And the water year we're having right now does not minimize the need for that work to continue. And we're busy conducting it collaboration with a lot of other people. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Mike.
Campbell. Excuse me. Campbell Ingram, Executive Officer of the Delta Conservancy. It's great to see everyone here in person and great to be out on a tour. Thanks to the Stewardship Council for organizing it. I'm excited about a couple things. We're going to talk a lot about the Restoration Subcommittee in today's meeting and it coming together similar to this effort, getting out into the field, bringing all the practitioners together and how valuable that is in coordinating and integrating our efforts. The other thing I think that's really exciting that we've talked about quite a bit in the Restoration Subcommittee is the statewide general permit for projects, the SERP and the CEQA process, and then the other cutting the green tape efforts that Department of Fish and Wildlife have been putting together. It should give us the ability to do these projects in less than 20 years, but significantly cut our time in getting things to scale up. Our big update is just that we were very fortunate to receive a pretty significant chunk of funding for nature-based solutions. And that's allowing us to look at a couple big projects that will look at whole island mosaics for deeply subsided islands, for wetland and rice cultivation to achieve the climate benefits and some habitat benefits that we've seen out here today too. So I think everything with the streamlining and funding available, kind of on an upswing here about getting things done.
Great, thanks, Campbell. Tim.
Good afternoon, Tim Ramirez. I'm a member of the Central Valley Flood Protection Board. I'm also grateful for the opportunity to be outside and with people. Thanks for organizing this. I had a lot of reasons I wanted to come today, and one of them I want to shout out our friend Mr. Kane. I knew John not the day he had this magical thought in his head, but I knew him then, and I was thinking today how many people have jobs and are going to write papers and launch their careers because of John's idea. And all these projects are like Dutch Slough have a John attached to them. John has other projects he's attached to besides this one, not just Dutch Slough, but it does take somebody with vision and energy who sees the landscape and all the moving parts. And if you don't have somebody like that, then you don't get to this point. And permitting and everything else takes a long time, local politics, but somebody has to run that process. So congratulations and thank you for all your hard work. Just wanted to say that out loud. But by the idea you get on also, like get some more of your time in the Central Valley. We're a little bit downstream from our area, but we're happy to be here. And I wanted to take an opportunity to introduce our new executive officer, Chris Lee, who just started. This is his third week. We're really grateful that Chris was able to be here today, meet some of you. We're excited to have him aboard. So that was a real big plus for us. And so I'm excited to attend. Just substantively, one of the things that I'm sure you'll have heard about and will continue to hear about is our pick your adjective, unprecedented, generational, crazy high snowpack, especially in the southern San Joaquin Valley. And this thing that people used to know about, maybe not, Tulare Lake. The Tulare Basin is going to be on our agenda. I think it's a standing item, so we'll get updates from DWR and our staff about what's happening on the ground, because we don't know exactly when things are going to happen, but we know generally what's going to happen. We don't know what the severity of the what is yet. So it's just a real busy time for a lot of people, including the technical people. And we talked about this years ago as a hypothetical, right? It's not hypothetical anymore. So what happened already is just probably the beginning with the rainfall. The snow hasn't started to melt yet. So it's getting warmer as all of us are sniffing and noticing. Thank God for Allegra. Grateful for that today too. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. We'll go over to Bruce.
Bruce Lodge, Delta Protection, and one of the new people as well, started in August. So most of the faces I look around and see are faces that I used to see on a Zoom screen. So yeah, I am that tall. You didn't show up on the It's one comment that's been a comment that people go, I had no idea. I was excited to see Wyatt come in and give the introduction, because Wyatt was just a member of our Delta Leadership Program that's wrapping up their activities for this year. So why it was a tremendous addition, as you can tell, to that group of young individuals and people, future leaders of the Delta. So that was tremendous. Sorry, again, I missed this morning, had some other obligations, but if you want to see Delta Protection Commission in this building, we'll be here on May 18th. That's where I'm here, 5 o'clock on May 18th. So happy to be here.
Thanks, Bruce. Glad to have you. Josephine.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Josephine Axt. I'm with the regional headquarters for the Army Corps of Engineers. It's been said, but I got to say it again, like I said, you in the bathroom, really nice to get out and touch the resource. I've been joking today. When I first started with the Corps a long time ago, I had a mentor who said, you know, you're going to be in an office a lot. You got to remember to get out there and know why you're doing what you're doing. In terms of updates, I will say that we are planning to sign an agreement with state and other partners on the Willow Comprehensive Study that some of you may be aware of, that will get after opportunity, you know, flood risk and ecosystem restoration. That's probably our biggest upcoming event. We have a long-standing, we call it the Delta Islands and Levees study that we are asking for in terms of the Corps of Engineers process to get a new start designation. That's the only restoration project that the Corps has that's ready to be built in the Bay or the Delta area. Listening to everybody talk, I can't help but add, it's been a busy year for the Corps as well in terms of the flooding and everything else. I've been really heartened by the extent to which, and I had a personal tour by Grayson for DWR. Thank you, Amanda, for having me. My partner and I were a little late getting to this morning's gathering because of the traffic. And I enjoyed so much talking to him and asking him about, for example, tribal involvement and the Dutch Slough project, et cetera. And within the Corps of Engineers, I'm here with Cindy Tejeda and back there, who's our tribal coordinator for the region. Every district has a tribal liaison as well, but just to the extent to which everything we do, we're prioritizing working with tribes, their involvement and knowledge when it comes to decision making. And I'm kind of touching on things that I've heard other people say. I'll wrap up, but as I missed 1 or 2 meetings, and I actually appreciated the pause that was taken. Why are we meeting? What do we do at meetings, et cetera? But it's great to be back here in person. So thank you.
Thanks, Josephine. And just on a sidebar, my staff really understand the value of restroom connection.
Okay.
So we'll just keep that.
Right. I noticed it's running because of the hot salsa, not allergy.
Laurel.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all. Nice to see some new faces. I'm Laurel Larson. I'm the Delta lead scientist, and there's been a lot going on with the Delta Science program since the last time we convened. I'll just hit a couple of the highlights quickly. So back in November, we had a harmful algal blooms symposium that was intended to lead to the development of a harmful algal blooms monitoring strategy. The writing of that strategy is currently underway, and recently a workshop summary was released. It's very detailed. You can see summaries of all of the presentations and links to those presentations. And so I encourage you to look that up on the council's webpage. We also submitted a listserv announcement. So if you subscribe to those, you should be able to find it. A little more recently, end of February, early March, we had an integrated modeling framework workshop where our tagline was one Delta, one science, one modeling framework. And that workshop acknowledged that there are a lot of big challenges out there, such as Chinook salmon recovery, drinking water vulnerability, management of salinity in the Delta during drought conditions that require agencies to come together and develop shared sets of modeling resources, or in some cases, just link the modeling resources that are available currently and make them more usable and transparent and easier to train people on. And so this modeling framework workshop was aimed towards developing a common set of ideas on best practices for modeling, shared resources that our community needs to and would like to invest in, and a common understanding of human resources that we need to develop as well. We are in the process of putting together the summary of that workshop, and we'll also be developing a white paper containing a concise set of recommendations. I'm happy to report to that through the process of putting on this workshop and bringing diverse communities together, we've also galvanized at least 2 agency academic partnerships and teams that are actually putting in proposals to get parts of this modeling collaboratory funded. And so hopefully I'll have some exciting updates on that in the near future. Right around the corner, this Wednesday, the Delta Independent Science Board will be meeting and kicking off a really cool seminar series on decision-making under deep uncertainty. The kickoff seminar speaker is Alice Hill, who previously served as special assistant to President Barack Obama and she's currently the senior director for resilience policy on the National Security Council. She's led the development of national policy to build resilience to catastrophic risk, including climate change and biological threats. And she's also co-author on a book called Building a Resilient Tomorrow, published in 2019. So she's going to hit on a lot of the themes that we hope to discuss through this seminar series that include things like looking at flood risk, horizon scanning, risk communication, dynamic adaptive management planning, mitigating cognitive biases, and incorporating human behavior into scenarios. So try to tune into that if you can. It's Wednesday at noon. And then our next seminar that will be a part of this series will take place June 14th at 1 p.m. with a focus on available tools for decision-making under deep uncertainty and their applications in California. And the featured speakers for that workshop will be Robert Lempert of the RAND Corporation, as well as Andrew Schwartz from the California Department of Water Resources. And then finally, also it feels like it's right around the corner, next week is the Adaptive Management Forum on May 4th. It is an all-day hybrid format meeting. The registration link was just recently sent out on the council listserv. So if you haven't signed up for that, please consider doing so.
Okay, Gary.
I'm Gary Gold, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Water and Science at Department of the Interior, here for Assistant Secretary Trujillo, and appreciate the chance to be here with our partners from the state, from local agencies, and within our federal family. We have some big challenges out west, including many here in the Delta. Prioritizing those comes down to our people, partnerships, and investments. We have a really committed team addressing these challenges. We're eager to continue building and enhancing our partnerships, which are really at the heart of every water challenge. Building those partnerships is what it comes down to. And we are very thankful to have funding from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Inflation Reduction Act that can allow us to make those investments. So we are addressing these challenges, big challenges head on through those lenses. And again, thank you for the chance to be here back in person. Very glad to engage.
Thanks, Gary. Cindy.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cindy Messer, the lead deputy director for the Department of Water Resources. And I'm sitting in today for our director, Carla Namath. Make it today, but I am very happy to be here. I did want to echo all the thanks for the tour this morning. It was great. And I'm just so reminded how nice it is to be in person, to see faces and folks I haven't seen in a long time, and just make those connections or reconnect, if you will, in ways that it's just too hard to do over Teams or Zoom. So thank you for that. Greatly appreciate it. Loved John Kane's story. I think I might have missed the second one, but you know, really what it did for me was just, and as I look around, you know, think about my own career as well, just the dedication that is in this room alone, not to mention the folks that were with us earlier, the folks we work with, but you know, that's what it takes, right, to get through a couple decades of getting sometimes projects in place. But we're here. It was wonderful to see. I love the presentations also from the science folks, just reminding us of the potential of these sites and, you know, and the worthwhileness of studying it, figuring out what's working, what can we carry over to other projects. So it was just a really great morning. And I think urgency is probably the word that's kind of coming up for me. I know we've talked about, needing to speed projects up, but we do. And I think it's just, folks have touched upon it. We see our world changing around us. We see it's dynamic. We've been living it, especially the last handful of years. So, this is the collective. These are the partners. There are others that we can, and should engage to get these projects, continue to get them in place, move them along faster, figure out from an adaptive management standpoint, where we go forward with this. So again, just very grateful for this group. Can't wait to hear the subcommittee updates. I know you all have been talking a lot about restoration. I didn't really have any specific updates. I think I will echo a little bit of what Tim said. There's just, a lot going on right now. We've all been kind of touched by drought and going through that in the last 3 years to have sort of a weather whiplash, as people call it, right? To big snowpack, lots of rain, flooding. So the department, obviously, along with a lot of folks in this room, have been kind of wrestling through emergencies, through planning for what's to come with the snowpack, taking up a lot of bandwidth and a lot of time right now. But for me, what today really kind of brought was this balance of, we need to address all of that. We need to stay on top of it, but there's also all this other wonderful, important work that we need to make sure we keep prioritizing. So with that, I say thank you again and looking forward to the conversation today.
Great. Thanks so much, Cindy. And you reminded me of why it was important for us to take that pause. And I'm glad that the pause worked well for you, Josephine. I hope it worked well for everybody else. But yeah, I think it was really important for me as the new chair, how do we make DPIIC that much more meaningful and engaging? And we heard time and time again when we had our check-ins with all of you, and a lot of you made that comment, if DPIIC didn't exist, we would be trying to invent DPIIC, right? And so I really feel that this is the forum. This is an excellent venue to be able to have those frank conversations. When I first met with Secretary Crowfoot, that was part of our discussion and our dialogue. Virginia, if we're going to be having some policy level discussions, then let's have all the policymakers there. If we're going to have more of the technical, discussions, then let's have the technical people there. So this is a great opportunity for us to, or for me personally, to see, who, how, and when we should all be getting together. So I've heard already today, wow, this was a great first DPIIC, to refocus, if you will. We'd like to see what you're going to do in November when you meet again. I said, don't worry, we'll beef it up. We'll come up with something even better. But again, all kidding aside, I really feel that DPIIC is a really great venue for us to be able to have these very frank and candid conversations. And where better than to go out into the field and to actually see the projects, to see the area, to tour the area, and again, be able to call Anna and say, hey, Anna, hey, Bruce, hey, Joaquin, having those conversations. And again, it's about building relationships. And Gary, I'm just going to tell you right now, I called you Gary Green for a long time and I don't know where, but yeah, seeing you now twice, in person, and to be able to, again, say, hey, Gary, what's happening? How can we work together? What can we do? This is what it's about. And being able to tease Mike about, our redness in our nose. It's building again on those relationships. Okay, moving along. Does anybody have, or is anybody opposed to approving the July 18, 2022 meeting summary?
I move to adopt the meeting.
Moved by Joaquin Escobar,
I'll second.
second by, I don't know that we need it, but we're gonna do it.
We need to ask for public comment.
Oh, public comment first, sorry. Okay, we have a motion in a second, no public comment. All in favor? Aye. Motion approved. Okay, before we jump into the presentations, and we're gonna try to keep this really short and sweet to the point, but I'd like to hear what you've been hearing from your staff from the Delta community about restoration challenges and opportunities. And just taking a couple of moments from all of us to, again, reflect on these two questions. Please share a reflection on the tour today to Dutch Slough, or what do you see as the biggest change or challenge or opportunity facing us as we try to make progress on restoration? I'll take volunteers. Anybody? I'll start picking on people.
You know, one thing I would bring up, Virginia, is it's been referenced a few times today, the cutting the green tape. And I think that is so important. During this morning's tour, I was hearing about, you know, the important considerations that have been brought up regarding certain mitigation, but the idea of changing our mindset when it comes to projects like the one we toured. I don't know how that butts up against, you know, legalities and policy, but I just feel like it's a point of tension that we've talked about, and I know there's initiatives that are striving to improve that. I just, in terms of your question on challenges, I feel like that's just an elephant in the room that everybody's got different probably relationships to and experience with and responsibilities for, but that it's just something to keep at the front of our brains going forward.
That's good. Yeah, I've heard that time and time again, the green tape. How do we cut the green tape? Thank you.
Yes,
That is definitely front and center. Others, maybe just a reflection on the tour today, and again, how does it relate to what Josephine just may have mentioned?
Chair, if I can I'll make a comment. You know, the State Water Resources Control Board actually adopted a general order just about a year plus ago at this point, which is meant to, so whenever you do permitting at the board, you know, we have 9 regional boards. You can get individual permits at those 9 regional boards, or the state board can adopt what's known as a general order. What that does is it brings it up out of the regional boards and creates the conditions. You know, we have general orders on like sanitary sewers and other elements. And here we specifically developed one with sustainable conservation and a lot of folks from the NGO community for large restoration habitat projects. There's already a small restoration general order that a lot of the projects can use, but large restoration general habitat restoration projects can go through this through this general order. The benefit is it incorporates fish and wildlife permits. So it is, and it incorporates other state agency permitting components, mainly fish and wildlife though, so that it's a one-stop permit as much as it can be. So what's also been done is the environmental review around it. So it took years to develop. It really required a lot of the state agencies to come together and standardize the way that they view the permitting terms. And so what we're hopeful is it will unlock a lot more restoration and restoration at scale, and get, you know, sort of the narrative that somehow the permitting process is the problem here. Because I think that permitting is a component of what are really complex problems, or projects rather, that experience complex problems, usually around funding, sometimes around getting power to sites, other things that aren't necessarily the permitting components. But here, at least the state has done its part to say, we want to get out of the way, we want to incentivize, and the large restoration general order is what we're hoping folks begin to start to use as you pursue future Dutch Slough or other projects.
Great points, Joaquin. Thank you so much. Yes.
Chime in. You know, the Dutch Slough project's a great project, but like most projects of that scale, they're enormous and very, very costly. Our organization is rapidly burning through our bond allocation from the previous bond. There's a lot of discussion about there and expectation. There are bonds that are in draft right now. That a bond will be a component moving forward. I think it's really important that all of the Delta entities really start to think about what are our priorities now, and then our priorities in the next 5 or 10 years, and collectively start to kind of put that package together and think about what the costs are going to be for that, and then collectively advocate for that.
Anybody else? If not, we'll just shimmy on, because I know we're a little bit behind. So now I'm going to turn it over to Amanda, who's going to help us transition to discussing to the DPIIC Restoration Subcommittee's work plan, what we learned during that recent Delta Restoration Forum, and work plan progress to date. So I have to say, it was February 8th, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, I was actually very pleasantly surprised. Over 150 participants, both virtual and in person, being able to go from table to table as they were having these discussions. It was so impressive to hear the different perspectives from equity, I mean, across the board. But the one thing that I did come back and I shared with staff I think that we need to do better. I think we can do better in terms of engaging with the private sector, specifically with landowners and farmers. And so I just want to thank the staff for today. I want to thank the staff for all of the work. And again, Amanda, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Chairman Vigno, and good afternoon, everyone. A little bit of housekeeping before we get to the really interesting stuff and hearing about all the work that the Restoration Subcommittee has been doing and the Restoration Forum. I just want to remind you just a little bit about the Restoration Subcommittee, that it was formed in response to Chapter 4, the Chapter 4 update, and one of the recommendations in that called for the formation. And really the purpose of the subcommittee is to identify and implement strategies for reducing barriers to landscape scale restoration. The Delta Plan has a goal of restoring 60 to 80,000 acres by 2050, which is consistent with statewide goals for biodiversity, like CNRA's 30 by 30 initiative. And so to date, the subcommittee has met 4 times. We've been meeting a couple of task forces to work on the work plan and to convene the first Delta Restoration Forum. And some of you may remember endorsing the subcommittee's vision and goals back in March 2022. And so since March 2022, the subcommittee, with the participation of many of your staff, have completed drafting the work plan, and we've actually begun implementing it. But we do want to just have you all, I just want to walk you through that real quick, and then we'll be asking for you to endorse the full work plan as well. So bear with me as we just kind of go through this, and I'm also happy to answer questions as we go. So next slide, please. So the work plan's 4 goals reflect our intention of improving interagency collaboration and meaningfully addressing the myriad of barriers to restoration. And I do want to note that each of the goals that I'll be walking through include a handful of objectives, and then each of the objectives include a few actions, which are not included on the slides just because it's a lot of words, but are included in the work plan link that everyone received in the meeting invite, and is also linked on the agenda. So the first goal is to provide forums for meaningful community participation in Delta restoration efforts. And so the focus of this goal is to ensure transparency, invite public participation, and really proactively reach out to folks we don't hear from enough in these spaces, in particular representatives of environmental justice, communities, and landowners. And we really felt that it was important to put the onus on us to do this work. Next slide, please. The second goal is to increase interagency collaboration to streamline restoration implementation. While the first goal is more outward facing, the second goal really is more internal facing toward the agencies sitting around this table. And the goal aims to help us collectively identify challenges and solutions and efficiencies and areas for improvement. The actions included in this goal require coordination with the Cutting the Green Tape efforts that are underway, review and consideration of other efforts that can inform our work, including the recently launched Delta Science Tracker and the Delta Independent Science Board's monitoring enterprise review, as well as the development and active management of this work plan. Next slide, please. The third goal is to identify opportunities in restoration planning and long-term management efforts. And while there's just a little bit of overlap with goal 2, the subcommittee felt it was very important to include a slightly more technical goal with related objectives and actions that really encourages exploring the use of current and future planning tools and initiatives, such as Delta Adapts. This goal also calls on the need to evaluate the effectiveness of restoration and opportunities for better implementing long-term adaptive management, monitoring, and synthesis by building on currently successful programs like the Fish Restoration Program, Delta Levees, and EcoRestore, among others, as well as coordination again with the Delta Independent Science Board. And next slide, please. And finally, the fourth goal is to increase transparency and coordination around existing, new, and needed restoration funding. As we were drafting this work plan, we heard a lot of confusion about available funding and frustration around various institutional bottlenecks related to getting projects on the ground. And so this goal really aims to better understand what funding is out there, what funding is needed, and to identify solutions to these bottlenecks. So now with these details out of the way, I'm going to turn over to Campbell, who's going to just really remind us why this collaborative work is important.
I mean, I think the work plan covers it very nicely, but I also think we've reflected a lot on the value of the tour today, being together, getting out there and seeing it. And the same really comes through in the restoration subcommittee. It's all of the entities, practitioners, the agencies, and the community too, coming together around restoration in a very similar way, and just focusing on how do we work together, being aware of what each other are doing, the lessons learned. Go back to green tape one more time. I think talking to folks at DWR, today, I'm not sure there was full awareness of what tools are absolutely out there and available in green tape realm. And so I think it just creates that space where we come together and we share. All the words on the paper are great, but to me, that's the highest level value. It's just bringing us together to develop those relationships, Terry, that you mentioned that are so important when we're all trying to collectively get along.
So I think now I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about the work plan and how it was developed. And then I think we'll need to ask for public comment before asking if there's a motion.
Yes. Eric, is there any public comment?
No, there's no.
Okay. I will now take a motion in a second to endorse the restoration subcommittee work plan.
I'll move.
Wonderful. Moved by Campbell, a second by Josephine. All in favor? Any opposed? Excellent.
So now I will turn it over to Dylan and Rachel and Viet Long, who are going to provide the more interesting updates and about the Delta Restoration Forum and the next steps.
Thanks, Amanda.
Next slide. Thanks, Amanda, for that great introduction. Thank you, Chairman Dueño, for convening us today, and thanks to all the DPIIC members for attending. It's really lovely to be with you all in the field, as many of you have already mentioned. Next slide. So I want to jump in. We are going to cover some of the highlights are the accomplishments of the Restoration Subcommittee to date. We started a little over a year ago, the activities here. And so it's been a productive year. We're looking forward to sharing this. And the first thing that we're going to share with you is more detail on the Restoration Forum. Some of the specifics that we accomplished during this event. Following this, I will then share a sort of point-by-point update of specific work plan items that we've made distinct progress on. And then we'll close with some of the things that we're thinking about moving forward into the future. So our Restoration Forum, like Virginia said, was held on February 8th. This planning, we spent about 6 months planning this. We asked for volunteers from the Restoration Subcommittee to participate in our Forum Planning Committee. So I do really want to highlight and thank Ivan Sinok from the Buena Vista Rancheria of Miwok Indians, who provided a tribal perspective as well as outreach as part of our planning committee. Doug Brown from Douglas Environmental and Gilbert Cosio, who's joined us today and joined us on the tour as well this morning, who helped connect the efforts to more of a local perspective in the Delta. And Jason John and Andia from the California Natural Resources Agency, who helped round out the state perspective here, in addition to our staff from both the Stewardship Council as well as the Delta Conservancy. So what we're going to present to you on this really was a team effort that embodies exactly that spirit of collaboration that Campbell was talking about. Trying to create a space for these conversations that was comprehensive, inclusive, useful, but also flexible, looking ahead to learning, taking the lessons learned from this forum and using them to inform how we're going to take future steps. Next slide. In general, as a group, we came together around these 4 high-level goals. So the first being for this first Restoration Forum, reviewing the amendments to Chapter 4 of the Delta Plan that both Amanda and Virginia have mentioned, using that as a springboard to discuss opportunities for implementing future restoration. Using this space also as a place to build cross-sector relationships and share information, really critical. And then, of course, gather feedback for future Restoration Forum meetings. Next slide. And just to situate you all a little bit in the context here. So a lot of numbers on this slide, but the take home here is to show us, first of all, that since 2007, which is the baseline for restoration in the Delta, actually have made considerable progress. So on that very top line, these are restoration projects across tidal wetlands, non-tidal wetlands,
and riparian and floodplain ecosystems. These are acreages that have been completed since 2007 on that top line. So we can see, particularly for tidal wetlands, about 5,700 acres of tidal wetlands have been constructed. And when we look at this, particularly in the context of progress to date, which is reflected on that graph, but is very tiny because we've really dwarfed the progress that's been made prior to 2007 in the last 15 years or so. And a lot of that restoration, just like Dutch Slough, has really occurred just in the last 5 years. So I really do like to think of this as we're entering sort of the golden age of restoration in the Delta. We're really starting to see large scale projects get on the ground. We also, as part of this effort that you're seeing the representation of here, we also captured both in progress projects. So we have some very large scale projects, notably the Lookout Slough project up in the Cache Slough complex that are currently in progress, and then planned projects. And this allowed us to look at sort of where we are when we take projects across those three categories. You can see there those total acreages, about 14,000 acres of tidal wetlands across all of those categories, close to 5,000 acres of non-tidal wetlands across those categories, and about 2,500 acres of riparian and floodplain. So while progress has been made, progress is currently actively being made in those in progress projects and planned projects, will get us part of the way towards our Delta Plan performance measure restoration targets. When we actually look at those specific acreage targets of 32,500 acres for tidal wetlands, 19,500 acres for non-tidal wetlands, and 16,300 acres for riparian and floodplain projects. And down there in red in the bottom, we see where our gaps are. And we see that even though we're making great progress, there's a clear need. We're going to have to really scale up the efforts that we've made to date in order to meet these Delta Plan restoration goals by 2050. And so, of course, that's what brings us together today. This helps contextualize why we found it so important to hold these forums, to bring together all the different kinds of people who are really critical. These projects depend, as we heard today, on so many dozens, hundreds of people over the years to actually get them across the finish line. So this, we have our work cut out for us, but our collaboration is increasing, and I think really the system is in a very strong place to move this forward. Next slide. And with that, I will hand it over to Vietnam.
Thank you. So with this in mind, the second half of the Restoration Forum started with our group conversations. We had this small cafe format where we set up groups of 4 to 6 people with note takers and moderators. And the purpose of these conversations was to get a better understanding of stakeholders' vision for restoration in the Delta. And more importantly, it was to scope the most important issues and topic areas to focus on for future restoration forums. Next slide, please. And in these conversations, attendees focused on the following guiding question: how can future ecological restoration be best implemented to support flourishing Delta ecosystems and human communities? Next slide, please. So over the course of our conversations, you'll see in this word cloud some of the most common words that were mentioned. And I want to give a big thank you to our note takers who did a great job to take down all of the important issues that were being discussed. And I want to thank everybody who attended and participated. From these conversations, which took about, and over the course of about an hour, we gathered over 40 pages of notes. Next slide, please. And from these 40 pages of notes, we gathered the following key takeaways. First, there is a clear need for improving outreach, engagement, and public education. Improved outreach to groups such as farmers, landowners, reclamation districts, and tribes should be an area of focus moving forward. One attendee shared that involving watershed councils and community groups would be beneficial in the planning process. Second obstacle that was frequently mentioned was funding and regulations. Funding is limited and it is difficult to know what funding is available and how to apply for it. Specifically, levies were mentioned as not receiving adequate funding. At the same time, there exists opportunity to leverage federal funding and to explore ecotourism as a funding source. And there is also more opportunity to streamline regulations and permitting, and agencies should continue and improve on efforts to make sure that processes are in conflict. Third, subsidence was a frequently mentioned challenge and should continue to be studied. Opportunities exist to deploy subsidence reversal projects to potentially store carbon and earn revenue from the carbon market. And subsidence and sediment supply solutions should be studied further. Another thing that we frequently heard about was multi-benefit projects. Multi-benefit projects should be explored to meet restoration goals while also mitigating risks for locals. These risks that we heard about include flooding, continued subsidence, and climate change impacts. One particular benefit that should be considered when planning these multi-benefit projects is public access and recreational opportunities. On a more general level, there was also lots of conversations about the challenge of balancing long-term planning and near-term restoration implementation. Considering that ecosystems evolve over long periods of time, and considering that restoration is an ongoing process, it is challenging to plan and implement and to sustain restoration efforts. And perhaps the most important takeaway, we learned that people were really eager to participate in these group conversations and wanted to keep talking even after the time was up. And one attendee put it best, and they shared that we need a regular forum to be able to collaborate and share our ideas, challenges, and opportunities. And with that in mind, we hope to build on the success of this first restoration forum. And now I'll hand it over to you, Rachel.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rachel Wigginton. I'm a senior environmental scientist at the Delta Conservancy. It's been really nice to meet a lot of you all today. And as Viet Long just observed, attendees were really eager at the Restoration Forum to connect. And in addition to those group conversations, we also provided a forum. It was about an hour, the last part of the forum agenda, where we had an open house. And what you'll see on this slide is the open house presenters, which covered a wide variety of topics. So we highlighted groups from government, such as CNRA's 30 by 30 initiative. We also had information from the Buena Vista Rancheria of Miwok Indians. We highlighted funding programs, specific projects such as the Van Buskirk Multi-Benefit Ecosystem Restoration and Planning Project, which is in the South Delta. So particular project proponents were there to interface with forum attendees to actually talk about those projects that are in planning, and even some of them like Van Buskirk pre-CEQA. The next slide, please. And we also had groups that were representing different funding opportunities for restoration, such as the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority or the Delta Conservancy's nature-based solutions work. And much like with the conversations that Viet Long was talking about before, we had to kick people out at the end. We're like, all right, guys, it's closing time, we gotta go. Next slide, please. And as we also mentioned, this first forum was really well attended, as Chair Dueño said. We had 146 total attendees, 49 of which were in person at the Delta Conservancy's office, and 97 joined us via Zoom. And this graphic on the slide here shows the various affiliations of those forum attendees. And while attendees for the purpose of these responses were allowed to choose more than one affiliation, we were really excited to see that 21 people that attended the forum identified as community members, and then an additional 17 identified as local government officials. So starting to get that local representation that we're seeking. However, we did notice that over half of the affiliations that are represented here are from state agencies, federal agencies, or consultants that are involved in restoration implementation. So that's a group of folks that we do have a lot of traction with and engagement with already. So while we certainly are really pleased with the interest and the attendance at the first forum, we want to continue to bring in additional groups such as farmers, tribal members, environmental justice groups, landowners, and again, just the broader Delta community, so they can be vested in these projects as we move forward. We told attendees at the forum, and we were really aware that there's a lot of wisdom to be gained from that really broad participation. So that's why we want to keep pressing to engage more and more different types of groups and folks. Next slide, please. And originally, when we were planning the first forum, which took place in February, we had planned to have a second really similar forum very shortly after the first. But we decided that we needed to take some time, as Dylan was mentioning, to really reflect and start to incorporate the lessons that we had learned in that first forum. Thus, we're planning to have a second forum in the spring that we're planning to host somewhere in the Delta, and to have it at a time when we feel like those particular groups that we want to engage with more community members will be available to attend. So probably in the evening or even on a weekend. And based on the feedback that we received, we anticipate that folks will be really interested in hearing about and discussing specific projects, so digging into some specific projects that will be going in. And we think that this will be a more central focus in the second forum. Last, we're really interested in additional community member voices in planning, so including more different types of group in our actual planning efforts. And we're thinking about different ways that we can continue to do additional targeted outreach to some of those groups that we're really interested in hearing from. So with that, next slide, please. So just wanted to take a moment at the end of this summary of our results from our first forum to hear from you all, both if you have any questions, but also really interested in this particular question from your agency's perspective. For future forums, is there additional information or input that you would like to receive from attendees of this event or similar events?
Right. Well, first and foremost, thank you, but are there any comments, any perspectives?
I'll say that I think the planning for this effort was really great. And we tried to incorporate a broad swath of different interests to bring them in. And it worked really well. But again, I think this is an opportunity here. If from your perspective, from your agency's perspective, if there's other information or other communities that we ought to be engaging, I think we've done a pretty comprehensive job in trying to corral that, but certainly I'm open to any other thoughts about how we should build on that.
Yeah, I'll just say, from my perspective, again, I thought it was an excellent turnout. The one thing that keeps pushing in my mind is one of the comments from one of the landowners who said, you all need to hear more from people like myself. And so I love the idea that you're going to go out in the evening on a weekend. If that helps to amplify and to bring in, again, more of those landowners, more of those farmers, I want to make sure that they feel as included as possible. We get that all the time, right? From the private sector, government isn't interested in hearing from us. Government's going to do what they're going to do. No, it's not. And I think that this is a really great step in moving forward. And we're going to meet the community where they feel best, where they feel most comfortable. So being out in the communities, I think that's really super important.
Madam Chair, if I may ask a question.
Absolutely.
There were 3 tribal individuals or affiliations mentioned. What was the engagement like from the tribal entities?
So I think at least one of those folks was our planning team partner from the Miwok band. And then I don't know if you know the other 2 individuals that were there.
At least one of them was his colleague, also from the Buena Vista Rancheria of the Miwok Indians. And I think that what we heard from them was that they did perform a good amount of outreach with travel groups, but that, as far as actually folks having the capacity to attend, it was somewhat limited. So I believe we had one more attendee who was able to attend online. So that's something that I think we're going to be constantly working on, because it's pretty well established that we're going to come up against capacity issues, and being just respectful and understanding of those capacity issues, I think is the cornerstone of any steps moving forward there. And I think one of the main things that came out of this effort, I think really was the development in more detail of that relationship with Buena Vista and their representatives, and sort of a stepping stone to keep trying, keep figuring out, are there things that are already happening that we can attend. So that relationship building, I think was an important first step here, but definitely one of those things we don't see as done by any stretch of the imagination.
Great, yes, it's like a good starting point, and look forward to more with our tribal partners.
And we did also, I'll just mention, have a presentation from them as well. So one of the benefits that really came out of that was their ability to also network with attendees and make clear some of the services that they can provide on different projects, connect them to project proponents who may be in need of more tribal perspectives in their restoration. That was something that was definitely happening in the room there. So heartening to see that.
Thank you.
Yes,
Jessica's up first.
Thank you. Just responding to this question, I guess I wouldn't be a good representative from BCDC if I didn't ask about or think about the question of public access. That came up in one of your slides as one of the items that it seemed like folks are really interested in. So I think moving forward, I think kind of digging a little bit deeper into what does public access look like and mean in restoration projects. How have folks experienced restoration projects before in terms of public access? How do we create different types of opportunities for public access to help mitigate some of the impacts or the conflicts that can occur, but really get people out there and get them to love these spaces and become stewards of these spaces and really become the next generation of people that want to continue to see this kind of work happening. So I just think public access is so core to making this work long-term sustainable. And so just kind of digging a little bit more into that moving forward, I think would be wonderful.
Jay?
Madam Chair, I have a couple of questions. I'm just curious how much dialogue might have focused on coming together around a galvanizing principle like water quality in the Delta and what we do to achieve that, or how do we prioritize, as Tim noted earlier, most at-risk areas from a flood threat perspective, and prioritize multi-benefit projects in that area. And I'm just curious how quickly folks may have gotten into the need to integrate different priorities in a systematic way that all interest groups could kind of understand a little more clearly.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I do think the importance of multi-benefit projects was one that many folks brought to the table there. And I do think that that's and that goes right along with public access as well. I think that often is one of the key outcomes of a successful multi-benefit project is making sure that there is access as appropriate. And so I think that these are themes that we do look forward to weaving together in future meetings. And one of the outcomes, once we've sort of covered our bases with these more general meetings, is going to be doing more targeted thematic conversations as well with the broader community. And I do think that multi-benefit would be, because of how broadly encompassing it is, would be a really appropriate sort of, galvanizing theme for a future forum. So I think that would work well.
Just one quick follow-up question. I'm just curious, in the Delta, where we've seen use of the Strategic Environmental Restoration Program exemption or other project expediting, or the application of other project expediting statutory authority to move things faster.
Yeah, good question. And that'll come up a little bit in some of our subsequent slides, but I will also speak to that now. So at our previous restoration subcommittee meeting back in March, we had a presentation from the Cutting the Green Tape Initiative. And the week after, the timing was a little bit off, but the week after the first statutory exemption for a restoration project was issued, through the Cutting the Green Tape program for the Knights and Wetland Restoration Project in Contra Costa County, which is actually very close to here, about 600 acres of mostly wetland and mixed habitat. So at this point, we do now have an example of this application in Delta, which until a few weeks ago, we didn't have that example. Yeah, the estimates there were that statutory exemption probably did cut at least a year, if not 2 years, off the project timeline. So it's encouraging, but that's something that we are also going to want to follow closely and engage with them to bring their lessons learned to the table as they navigate that. But first one is often the hardest to sort of push through. And so I think now that we do have an example, we really have something to work with here.
Just quickly, I think one of the keys to that success was that it actually had a letter from the 5-county coalition in support of utilizing the service section. So I think that's a very key lesson learned. That ought to be the standard with projects that want to use that certification.
Good point.
Sorry, Rachel, you probably got
That was like literally what I was gonna say.
I couldn't wait.
Thank you.
Absolutely, Jay. Any other questions? I just had a follow-up question with regard to these more in-depth thematic conversations with key groups in the Delta. Are we thinking, and I think Jerry, you were going there, with the tribal community, and I just wrote down a couple of things, landowners, EJ communities, migrant farm workers, I don't want to call them fishermen, but fisher people, boaters. Do you guys have, those groups already identified, or are you still exploring further into that?
Yeah, so we do have some of those groups identified, not necessarily every group that you mentioned. So, but yeah, that's, process. We're in process of making those connections. And I think that's one thing that we would really welcome from the DPIIC as well, is just, as we continue to update and brief you all on our progress as a subcommittee, tell us where we're, maybe missing folks. So I don't think, for example, the floating community has been as much integrated, although we did have representation at the forum from the Bethel Islands Marina. So that was heartening. So we have made some progress there, but I think that there's an important difference between posting something and expecting people to come, and then also going to where people are. So I think over time, as we sort of hone our message and approach more, we'll be better suited also to go where people are, understand where there's a place we can table and talk to people, where we can share information about upcoming restoration projects. So we're looking forward to that aspect of the work building.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that when you find a champion within each of those communities, and if you can not only have that champion be an advocate, but actually be, somewhat of your, that's the go-to person, because there's trust built with them. And so once you develop that trust, you can branch off from there. But I think those first meetings are absolutely critical to have somebody vested from the community, inviting, being part of, and having enough knowledge to be able to at least become your ambassador, community ambassador. So yeah.
Yeah. And in that regard, the last thing I'll say there is that I think a key to this too is that this effort really is not standalone. It's very synergistic with so many things that are happening at the Conservancy, at the Council, at other DPIIC member agency groups. And so I think as we build capacity across those different groups and relationships, we're already seeing relationships form based on that across multiple groups, which is again just heartening to see.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you, Rachel, Vietnam, Dylan.
And then we do have a little bit more here on updating on the work plan.
Perfect.
So
Okay.
Just a few more slides.
Yes, I was going to ask for public comment on this particular item. Do we have any public comments?
No, Madam Chair, there's no public comment.
Oh, yeah, wait, yes, we do.
I just want to card back and public comment.
Absolutely.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Gilbert Coates with almost MBK Engineers, River Delta Consulting. For many years, I was part of MBK Engineers, owning it for most of those years. This step, the implementation subcommittee, I think is the greatest thing to come out of a government planning agency in a long time, because to go from DPIIC to implementing without filtering through a committee like this bringing in landowners, outreach, and that sort of thing. It's just missing. I've been after it for 40 years, and sometimes you try to make comments at DPIIC meetings, but it doesn't get down to the people like these people that are actually implementing your program. And so it's been nice to sit in with them, kind of connect, form a relationship to the point where tomorrow some of you in the room are going to be with John, Eric, and I touring the South Delta, because that's how this came about. And I was looking at the revised chapter 4, I realized, the South Delta is slammed with habitat or acreage. And I knew at the same time John was dealing with the Paradise Cut program and all the other things down there. So I talked to Sean. I said, hey, what do you want to do? We got to show this implementation group what the ground looks like. So you need to start in your mind figuring out what really can we do that? So many thousands of acres of that shot. So I just want to say thanks for putting this group together, because it's really a good transition from your high level group to not quite on the ground, but it's getting there. And so I think let's just keep going, and hopefully we can not only start talking to the South Delta, we bring in the Central and North and whatnot. And you talk about collaboration. I remember Tim Quinn's paper from a couple of years ago that he figures collaboration out in the mid-90s, which I can't disagree with, because in the 80s we were collaborating, and then in the 90s we weren't. But this is kind of the first step, like you said, to form trust, relationships, and start trusting people. And as you know, the Delta agencies are not the most trusting of California symbol that keeps showing up in their backyards. And so I think this is a great first step. Then one last thing I want to say. I've been out here for a long time, and in my resume, I have a map that shows all the districts I've worked for as district engineer. I think I have 45. Well, on the tour today, I was reminded that I was actually the engineer for Dutch Slough for a very short period of time. So we formed Rec District 2137. While John was doing all the heavy lifting, breaking down barriers and whatnot, we had to come in and look at these levees to make sure that they stayed up long enough to implement this project. And so as we went around the Emerson Slough, I started looking at this riprap and growing nothing, and I realized that's my riprap. Because that levee had taken a beating in the floods of the 1990s. There was a lot of erosion, there were low spots, we missed some low spots. So like I said, I could add 46 recommendations.
Those are the habitat, yo.
Well, I've done a lot of habitat. that was not one of them. I remember I'm on the side of that hay trailer. And there's no riprap. I remember putting it in, you had to work around the trees, you could put the trees up. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Gil. That's great. Thank you so much. Yes.
Sorry, I didn't thought of card either. Just a low color, my great Thomas Harvey worked at Apple Heritage Institute. Great vision for this term, the whole Delta in Utah Marsh. And one of the first person I met with was Bill and his clients. They're like, pick a smaller part. Couple comments. One comment is I really like the multi-benefit emphasis. I think you can even go a little stronger on the flood management integration. You got the YOLO project, Paradise Cut project, and Tim will tell you from the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan, this idea of multi-benefit as a way to piggyback on these investments we have to make in public safety is a great opportunity. So Gilbert's comment about, even when you do a Dutch Slough project, you got to be paying attention to the revenues is an opportunity there. My comment / question is, comment would be, I think it would be great. I think it's great that you've created this. I wish there was a forum like this. It wasn't just a gatekeeping forum, but more of an empowering forum to communicate what's going on. And if it could be taken a step further, when you're actually analyzing a pipeline of projects and partnering with the people that are trying to move those projects forward and helping them move it along, I think that would be really valuable for projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? Nope. Okay. Thank you again. And any more public comment, Eric?
No, Madam Chair, no public comment.
Okay. Again, thank you to all of you for joining us this morning and this afternoon. It tells me that we should have on-site tours the entire day. That way we don't lose half of the audience. But it's great. It's actually great to see that we have this level of participation even at this late hour. the next DPIIC meeting is scheduled for November the 6th. And we do have a few ideas of where we want to focus the next meeting, but we'd really appreciate hearing from some of you on where and how, and some of the issues that you feel would really benefit from our time together for the next meeting. So if you really have some core themes or issues that you would really like us to explore and discuss at the next DPIIC meeting, please let us know. And we will definitely plan around that. And of course, Amanda is our go-to person. So if you don't share them now, we can definitely reach out to Amanda afterwards. Eric, again, is there any public comment?
No, ma'am.
I'm looking to see if our attorney's here. She's here. So I'm doing it. Is there any public comment for anything not on the agenda? Eric?
I am seeing no public comment.
Perfect. I'd like now to entertain a motion and a second to adjourn this meeting. Is there a motion?
So
Moved by Bruce and a second by, I saw a hand, Gary. And with that, everybody in favor? Aye. This meeting is officially over. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Oh my God.